Welcome to Tactical Talk. This is Zain. Today, the topic of our show is how will Pakistan and US relations be post the Afghan withdrawal? What does the future hold for the Pakistan and US relations? As we speak, Afghanistan is being controlled by the Taliban. Today, the guest of our show is Dr. Claude Rakisits. He is the Honorary Associate Professor at the Australian National University, a senior academic. Welcome to our show, Dr. Claude Rakisits. This is Zain Khan. It's a pleasure having you on Tactical Talk.
Thank you very much for having me again. It's good to see you.
It's always great to see you and talk about geopolitical issues. I want to get to the first question, Dr. Rakisits. Pakistan has been trying to balance the relationship between the United States and China for the past 4 to 5 years. Do you think Pakistan has been successful?
I would say yes and no. And let me explain. First of all, it's a very difficult balancing act to play for Pakistan, given that on the one hand, you have China, with which, of course, Pakistan has a very close relationship, so close really that it's effectively now in the Chinese orbit. And on the other side, you have the United States, a long-term relationship that the Pakistanis have had with Washington going back to the 50s. But the problem there is it would be okay if it was just China on one hand and Pakistan and the United States on the other hand. The problem is, of course, increasing rivalry, competition, call it whatever you want, between the United States and China. And that makes then the relationship between Washington and Pakistan that much more difficult. So it has balanced it okay, but also the United States, certainly since Trump and also under Biden, the relationship really has been downgraded. Don't forget, Trump really cut billions of dollars off in military aid as well to Pakistan. And that's a real issue. And the other issue is, of course, because Pakistan is so close now to China, the United States simply doesn't trust Pakistan as much. And there's been very much a trust deficit for many, many years now. And the China factor really has reinforced that.
Dr. Rakisits, I think the China factor came into being because the United States did not have much to offer, even though Pakistan is still trying to balance out the relationship. But obviously CPEC, the flagship project of the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, have been part of Pakistan's backbone, which obviously, as you've just mentioned, has tilted Pakistan towards China. But do you think, has the US tried to upgrade its relations with Pakistan? Because Pakistan has been trying.
No, I don't think the Americans have tried to build up the relationship at all. Notwithstanding the fact that, and we can talk about that later, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, Pakistan has played an important role in the developments in next door in Afghanistan and being a facilitator in bringing the Taliban to the table, for negotiating table with the United States, to hold the negotiations going on in Doha. Now, how influential was Pakistan in that? It's difficult to tell. The bottom line is this: the Taliban would not have gone to the table if it didn't want to. I mean, it doesn't matter how close the relationship may have been or is between Pakistan and the Taliban. You can't force someone to the table, simply on the basis that, look what I've done for you for the last 25 years. So they were facilitators. How much did it help? Who knows? But
I agree.
They absolutely played an important role in that. Just like, just given that is actually part of the topic as well, and what's happening next door, which is really horrible. There's a lot of discussion out there saying, without Pakistan, Taliban could have done what it did now. Well, I beg to differ on that one. Because, and there are many reasons for that, maybe if we got more time later on as to how and why the Taliban won so easily. But Pakistan may have had a good relationship with the Taliban, but it's not simply thanks to them that they are now in power in Kabul. Now, the other thing that's important is that, the Pakistanis were important. Pakistan was important in facilitating the Taliban to come to the table. Also because everyone knew, Pakistan, the Taliban, you and me and everyone else, that the United States, certainly starting on the Trump, wanted out. And that facilitates things a lot. If you know the person you're negotiating with on the other side of the table wants to leave and basically wants to cut a deal, pretty much any deal, makes life pretty easy for you, in this case, for the Taliban. I know I went a bit off the topic there, but
No, it's good. That's how discussion works. And as you've just said, that the United States had planned to pull its troops out. I've been talking to many international analysts, and they've been saying the same thing. It was in the United States' national interest to pull the troops out, because if it stayed for another 10 years, the American worldview was not, it wasn't achieving anything out of this. How do you perceive this? Do you think that the United States should have stayed, or do you think they made the right decision?
I think they made a fundamental mistake. I may disagree with all the people you've spoken to, but I wouldn't be the only one who thinks this. The main reason I believe it was a mistake, and I'm not even talking about the whole execution of the departure, which was a total fiasco. Okay, everyone would agree with that. Everyone. I think the United States should have stayed, because what the message it sent, all the way from Beijing to Moscow and everyone in between, friends and foes, is that there is a superpower called the United States, and it doesn't have the staying will, the staying power to stay in Afghanistan with just 3,000 troops or 2,500, whatever it is, and just decides to leave. And look what's happened. And I hope that the Taliban are actually not lying when they say everything's going to be good and human rights will be followed and that sort of stuff. But the fact is, the message it sends, that Biden has sent actually, given that they're leaving as we speak, to the whole world, is that if a superpower cannot afford to stay with just 2,000 or 3,000 troops, which is nothing, okay, in a small country called Afghanistan, actually it's the size of France, but it's a big country, what sort of power, what kind of will it have when it comes to the crunch, real crunch, in the competition with China? And that's the message that people are getting, and friends will be worried and foes will be smiling.
I know we're getting off topic, but another quick question that I've been observing.
Okay.
You're criticizing the Taliban coming back into Afghanistan. Now, I see Western academics, Western journalists praising the Taliban. Now, if you see some Pakistani journalists doing it, some Middle Eastern journalists doing it, or academics, you can say that, they probably have a bias, or, they're speaking out of their own opinion or national interest or whatever, you can, but how can you reason with the fact that you have Western academics, female journalists, saying that the Taliban are reasonable, there wasn't even a shot fired? I mean, I'm being neutral right now. I'm not taking sides.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
How is that even possible unless there's some PR thing working here?
Okay, absolutely. Well, a couple of things. I'm as you probably know, I'm actually very busy on the Twitter sphere, and I've yet to see any Western journalists say that. I haven't. Send me the links. That's fine. But I'm sure there would be a few. Okay. Well, these people either don't know a thing about Afghanistan, know nothing about the Taliban, and know nothing about history. Okay, because to say that it's a good thing that the Taliban is coming in is utter madness. And to start with, the women and young girls in Afghanistan are very scared. So if the return of the Taliban is such a good thing, why are they so scared? That's one issue. The other issue is the return, because the Taliban has come and has arrived without shooting, basically, because it wasn't a military victory. It was a political victory. okay, with a bit of military muscle, but they're hardly shot. Basically, everything was already basically dealt with. The Taliban cut deals with the warlords in the north and in the east and everywhere else, actually, for that matter. And that's why it was so easy, and that's why it was so quick. And the American intelligence just simply got that wrong. But one of the fundamental reasons why the Taliban got into Kabul so quickly is because there was actually no will on the part of the Afghan National Army and security forces to actually fight and die for a corrupt regime. Already over close to 70,000 of them had been killed. That's a lot of dead people to protect a corrupt regime, more than all the Americans who died in Vietnam, for example. But these are Afghans who died, and they thought, you know what? Why should I lay my life down and die for this corrupt regime? And so a lot of them just lay down their arms or crossed the border or just simply went home. And so what happened is actually, it makes a lot of sense, but the intelligence just simply wasn't there. It's an intelligence fiasco of major proportion on the part of the Americans. I'm not sure that answers your question. So I think now the Taliban then coming back to power, they are the Taliban 2.0 is going to be as ruthless, if not worse, than the first one, because there will have been opposition, if you want to call that, for 20 years, and they will seek revenge. They were very upset, but they've learned a lot. And now they've also, what's incredible about now this time is that they managed to cut deals with all the warlords in the north and the east and the west without having to fight them. They've actually conquered more land now than they had in 2001. It's incredible. And they beat the Americans.
What if after all is said and done, I mean, what if we're wrong? What if we see a bunch of Talibans acting like hippies and not killing anybody? But let's see what happens in the next few months. Getting back to the topic, Pakistan has assisted the US in the Afghan peace process, but Biden didn't seem interested in engaging in Pakistan's political leadership in the midst of the troop withdrawal. Do you think he made a smart move? Because Trump was engaging. No. Biden, when he came in, he just didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to look at I think that it was a big mistake, and I think I sort of covered that a bit. I think it was a big mistake not to talk to the Pakistanis. I mean, they were helping out, facilitating the whole peace negotiation in Doha between the Trump administration and the Taliban. And then now after Trump, and that's all done, and it's an agreement that Biden liked and decided to execute, which he did not have to, incidentally, but he decided to. That's his prerogative. As I said, I think it was a mistake, but that's another point. No, the problem is with the Biden administration and its relationship, this broader relationship with Pakistan, is that one, there's a lack of trust, okay, with or without the peace agreement. If you want to call this a peace agreement, I would call it, a better term would be a facilitating exit ticket for the Americans. It wasn't a peace agreement because the Taliban broke all the agreements underneath it. But the fact is, the Biden administration and the relationship with the Taliban, with the Pakistan government, started from on a very bad footing. To start with, there was, of course, the whole issue, and I think we spoke about that last time, the whole Daniel Pearl issue. If you remember that, the Supreme Court decided he needed to be released, having only spent 20 years in jail. Okay, the Americans took this badly and they said, "Well, what is this? This guy's a killer. He shouldn't be released." So that set a bad tone to start with. But the fact that President Biden hasn't even had the courtesy to call the Prime Minister of Pakistan, it's incredible. He's called everyone else. That's simply not good enough, especially given what Pakistan did to facilitate the peace agreement in Afghanistan.
And then,
I mean, it's just basically,
you had the Pakistan's prime minister actually had to say that I'm not waiting for his call. I mean, that created friction, in my opinion.
yeah, absolutely. So it's basically it's a lack of courtesy on that part. Now, the other thing that's really hasn't helped the Pakistan-US relationship is the fact, as you know, that the United States is pushing India to have a bigger role in Afghanistan. This is even before the Taliban has took over Kabul, okay? And I suspect, and as you know, Blinken just went to visit India just recently. They knew, I mean, the Taliban was already on the move, so they knew the game was up. And they're still pushing then for India to have a bigger role in Afghanistan. Now, they would know as well that to have Indians, and I'm not talking about so much as boots on the ground, but a greater sort of role of India in Afghanistan will be a red rag to the Pakistani bull. It's just simply wrong. It just simply would stir up things. Because, in IR, you have to think about how do things look like from that country you're investigating. And if you're in Islamabad, things look very different than if you're in Washington.
Now, these last few questions are the million-dollar questions. Now that Afghanistan is being run by the Taliban as we speak, and the US troops are withdrawing, and it's going to be complete in the coming weeks or months, where does the Pakistan and US relations go from here?
I would say they will probably deteriorate. I cannot see them improving, notwithstanding what I said about the peace agreement. But in many ways, the peace agreement is irrelevant. Sure, there's an agreement. Incidentally, the Taliban has told Americans today, apparently, that they would not shoot on the Americans or the Brits or the Australians, for that matter, and let all of them leave, take with them whoever they want, and off they go. But the fact is, notwithstanding the fact that the Pakistan government was a real facilitator in the peace agreement and allowing basically the Americans to leave, at least with some sort of honor, fig leaf. The fact is, the Americans will no longer need Pakistan as much anymore because they're out of Afghanistan. And that's really important. And the other thing why it'll deteriorate is, and I think I mentioned that slightly, is that they are putting more and more of their strategic eggs, that's Americans, into the Indian basket. Okay, part of this quadrilateral security dialogue, the Quad. And they've decided India is more important than Pakistan. And sure, it's a much bigger country, I understand this, and it's all about China. At the end of the day, that's China, and the relationship between China and the United States, or the competition between the two, is a prism through which Washington will look at their relationship with other countries, including Pakistan's. And so, given that Pakistan's relationship with China, it's going to make life a bit more, well, the relationship more prickly between the United States and Pakistan.
I agree with you from the geopolitical standpoint, but when you look at India and the United States, you see a lot of Indian intellectuals and journalists now criticizing the United States. I mean, do you think it's going to work out? Because you see a lot of friction right now, and they're blaming the United States for Afghanistan. I mean, India seems a bit confused at the moment with its relationship with the United States, not on a country to country level, but at least people to people level, if we look at Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I don't think it's going to be a straightforward relationship, because, of course, there's the whole thing of Kashmir as well, and human rights. So these are two big issues that are really going to be create difficulties in the relationship between United States and India, but only to a certain extent. When Blinken was asked at a press conference in India recently about the wobbliness of India's democracy he answered, and everyone knew what they were talking about. They were talking about the maltreatment of Muslims in India, the maltreatment of Kashmiris rather. And he answered, well, democracy in the United States and in India. So he put both countries in the same bag, is a work in progress. Now that's incredible to actually say that. And of course, that was music to the Indian ears, I can tell you that. So there's a limit to how much Biden, notwithstanding the fact that Biden is saying that human rights is going to be at the center, front, and everything of its foreign policy. Well, I think they're a bit selective about that. And it's not. And a lot of Kashmiris, as you know, I follow them quite closely on it. The whole Kashmir issue hasn't moved an inch under Biden. I'm not sure how far. I don't think it's going to even move another inch, because notwithstanding the human rights side of things. So there are problems in the relationship, but at the end of the day, the Americans have decided with the other members of the Quad that having India in their camp is a safe thing to do. It's a good thing to do in sort of confronting or countering China.
The last question, Dr. Claude Rakisits, looking at the positive relationship between the United States and Pakistan over the years, if we look at the history, not the current situation, what steps should both the United States and Pakistan take to upgrade their relations for times to come in the future? How can they make it better if it was possible?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think what they need to do is they should really focus, both of them, they really need to focus on non-security type issues like development, health, the soft sort of things I'm looking at here. I jotted down a few ideas. It could be things like in education, energy, health, that sort of stuff. Things that are easier to deal with, because the fact is Pakistan is increasingly, or pretty much completely now, in China's orbit, certainly in security issues. So there is no point in competing with China in the security sphere. But let's then do work then maybe in non-security issues. But having said that, the Americans would not want to break completely its links, its ties with Pakistan and their intelligence, because Pakistan, if there's any country that knows the Taliban, it will be Pakistan. And so the Pakistan will be its window, America's window into Afghanistan, because all intelligence is gone now. All links are gone. They have no bases there. The closest is UAE and in Qatar and all that. So they really would need to keep good relations with Pakistan to be able to still be able to more or less read what's happening in Afghanistan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Claude Rakisits, for being on Tactical Talk. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much for having me, and we'll meet again, I'm sure.
This was Dr. Claude Rakisits, an academic, a senior academic, and also the Honorary Associate Professor at the Australian National University. We were discussing the future of Pakistan and US relations post-troop withdrawal. Until the next episode of Tactical Talk, keep on watching Tactical Talk. This is Zain Khan. Take care and goodbye.